After the fall of the Berlin Wall, all the East German companies had to become part of the market economy. This was a process that took years, and if I say that some things did not go as planned, that will be an understatement. I dug into it and I found some things that really made me hold my breath. Coming up. At the end of 1989, after the Iron Curtain had opened, it quickly becomes clear that East Germany's economy needs to change from a planned economy to a market economy. A group of East German intellectuals sees that coming. While most people are still celebrating, they think it is important to avoid that the assets of the German Democratic Republic, the GDR, will fall into the wrong hands, such as the hands of West German capitalists or high-ranking East German politicians. Which would be a shame because the companies and the industry is what the East Germans have been working hard for during the last 40 years. The group of East German intellectuals generates the idea to form a so-called Treuhand. The Treuhand, which means trustee, is an agency that will be entrusted with privatizing the East German enterprises. Based on the fact that in the GDR most of the productive assets are publicly owned, so-called publicly owned enterprises, volkseigene Betriebe, they come with the idea that every GDR citizen should get an equal share of the so-called Volkseigentum, the public property. This would mean that every one of the 16 million GDR inhabitants will get an equal share of 40,000 GDR marks. A positive side effect of getting a share would be that less people will go to the West, as during the first months after the opening of the wall already hundreds of thousands of East Germans have left for West Germany for good. In February 1990, the idea of the founding of a Treuhand agency is officially approved. The idea is that investors from the whole world will be invited and can invest their capital in joint venture companies. It is estimated that this will generate hundreds of billions of marks. After 4 decades of dictatorship, the East Germans can decide for themselves what they want, which they do during the first free and fair elections of the GDR in March 1990. The people choose for political parties propagating a West German lifestyle and the reunification of Germany, instead of those parties promoting the 40,000 marks share certificate. And while in the beginning of 1990 the newly established Treuhand is still inventing itself, in one specific industry a number of West German capitalist companies is able to make some very profitable business deals with the help of high GDR state officials. Which is exactly what the Treuhand was meant to avoid. We're talking about the banking and insurance sector. There is only one private insurance company in the GDR, the Staatliche Versicherung, that has 30 million insurance policies in its portfolio. West German insurance company Allianz takes over 51% of the Staatliche Versicherung for only 271 million Deutsche Mark. The deal has been tied up end of January already, leaving no chance for other interested parties. The contract is signed in March. Edgar Mast is the Deputy General Manager of the GDR state-owned bank Die Staatsbank, and came up with the plan of a new bank that takes over the full saving and lending business from the GDR Staatsbank. In the greatest secrecy, he prepares the deal with the West German Deutsche Bank that will become 49% owner of the new bank. In March, the Memorandum of Association for the new Deutsche Kreditbank is signed without any involvement of the Treuhand. Also, smaller East German banks are taken over by West German banks, mostly for only tens of millions of Deutsche Marks, while taking over credit claims worth billions, for which the state covered for all cases where these receivables would not be collectible. For example, the Berliner Bank from West Berlin takes over the Berliner Stadtbank from East Berlin for 49 million Deutsche Mark. The deal included credit claims worth 11.5 billion. That's what I would call a good deal with a negligible risk. At the end, the banks receive around 98 billion Deutsche Mark of compensations for irrecoverable debts. After months of work, in June 1990 the legal basis for the reintroduction of the private ownership in the GDR, the Treuhandgesetz, the Trusteeship Act, is formally adopted. It will come into force in July. On the 1st of July 1990, the Deutsche Mark is introduced in East Germany. Helmut Kohl, the West German Chancellor, soon to become the Chancellor of the reunited Germany, promises that within a couple of years it will be worth living in all 5 East German states. And he speaks of blühende Landschaften, flourishing landscapes. Kohl later admitted that he was aware that this was a lie, but he didn't want to present a much more negative truth and hurt the self-esteem of the East Germans. But at the end, a lot of Germans state that the self-confidence and pride of the GDR citizens may have heavily suffered just because of this false promise. With the introduction of the D-Mark, the GDR suddenly has become an expensive country. The exchange rate for the GDR mark to the Deutsche Mark was 4.4 to 1. But the introduction of the Deutsche Mark went 1 to 1, so overnight everything suddenly has become 4.4 times as expensive, resulting in a situation where companies cannot pay their staff and their bills anymore. In July 1990 only, liquidity loans worth 10.3 billion Deutsche Mark are paid to the vast majority of the East German companies. Unemployment is increasing with 40,000 people a week. That same month, the now 133 Treuhand employees moved their offices from Unter den Linden to the Alexanderplatz, into the Haus der Elektroindustrie. As of the beginning, the Treuhand is besieged with East German people who, with the economic crisis getting bigger and bigger, fear for their future. For the Treuhand employees, it is clear what their main activity will be the upcoming months: spending money to keep the heads of all companies above water. Who benefits from this devaluation of the economy? The patiently waiting Western investors. Also in July 1990, Detlef Rohwedder becomes the director of the Treuhand and makes a clear statement about the share certificates. He states, the term public property was just an invention of socialist countries and a euphemism for the fact that ownership as such had been abolished. So the people should not expect any money from the state. 2 months later, in September 1990, Rohwedder announces that the Treuhand might need more money than it would bring, which makes the people realize that they have been presented a much too positive picture of what the privatization would bring. Mid-1990, an independent group of professionals starts analyzing which companies will be capable of surviving, which ones need to be modernized, and which ones need to be shut down. Pentacon is an established company that produces photo cameras, but has been making big losses. After the currency union in July, the production of a camera that is sold for 200 marks cost 1000 marks. The situation is no longer sustainable. With its 5,000 employees, it is the first big company that the Treuhand plans to close. Planned date? October the 3rd. But suddenly realizing that this is the day of the German reunification, the announcement is made on October 2nd. In October 1990, the Treuhand does only have 380 employees. At the end of 1990, it will be 2,700 people working for the Treuhand. 1 year later, the agency already has 4,000 employees, divided over the Berlin headquarters and the regional offices. The more employees the Treuhand has, the more work it can do, the more poorly performing companies are being closed. Tens of thousands of people lose their jobs. The Treuhand is the most hated company in the country and Detlef Rohwedder the most hated man, as he said himself in March 1991. On April 1st, 1991, Rohwedder is assassinated in his own house. At the location where the sniper fired his shots, a letter of confession signed by the RAF, the Red Army fraction, is found. The country is in shock for several days. At the Treuhand, the work is resumed almost immediately. The book containing all companies that need to be privatized is finally finished and is presented in a press conference by the Minister of Finance. Birgit Breuel, who has been working for the Treuhand since end of 1990, succeeds Rohwedder. At the end of the month, the Treuhand headquarters in Berlin, now counting almost 2,000 employees, moves to the former Reich Air Ministry, Reichsluftfahrtministerium. The building will be named Detlef Rohwedder House in 1992. A lot of things go wrong in the huge privatization operation of East Germany. In numerous cases, the Treuhand does not perform sufficient background checks of the investors. Investors don't need to prove that they are who they say they are, they don't have to prove their creditworthiness, and they don't have to show a business plan of what they intend to do with the GDR company that they are interested in. Most important is to have a connection working at the Treuhand, someone who would say, I know him, that guy's okay. In general, the transactions take place with conditions that are that good that the buyer mostly has limited risk or no risk at all. Not infrequently, companies are sold for only 1 deutsche Mark, where millions are subsidized by the Treuhand that pays off debts, pays for the cleaning of polluted areas and for the severance payments. The contract mostly states that the new owner has to guarantee to employ a minimum number of employees for the next few years and that he also has to invest a minimum amount of money. But the Treuhand often neglects to take action when the acquirer fails to fulfill his contractual obligations. Also, contracts are not always fully watertight, so the new owners sometimes find ways to not abide by their obligations. What happens in a lot of cases is that after a few years the companies go bankrupt. Millions of subsidies flow into the wrong hands. Investors simply take them from the company or the money gets lost via trickier construction. The fact that the Treuhand made it often easy for imposters to take advantage of its credulity was also used in court as grounds for mitigating the penalties of the fraudulent investors. The exact damage is still difficult to estimate. Some speak of several hundreds of millions, some of 8 billion and some even of 25 billion D-marks. Some examples of cases where things went seriously wrong. WBB, Berliner Wärmeanlagenbau GmbH, is a healthy company that builds cogeneration plants with 153 million marks on its bank account, a full order book and millions worth of assets. Fraudster Michael Rothman buys the company via a Swiss shell company. The Treuhand fails to get an independent accountant's opinion and even pays off 31 million of all debts. What follows is the biggest German reunification crime case. The company WBB is systematically plundered, which includes fictitious business transactions, assets sold to fictitious agents far below value, expensive consulting contracts without any consulting activity, forged credit ratings, manipulated balance sheets, and a highly untransparent international structure of companies. In 1995, 5 former WBB employees were arrested and convicted to up to 3 years in jail. Michael Rothman was accused of embezzling 50 million euros, of which 20 million for his personal use, and was sentenced to 3 years and 9 months in prison. But the judgment was contested based on a mistake by the Berlin judges, so he walked out free. Leuna Works in Leuna is a big chemical industrial complex with almost 30,000 employees. Even the Chancellor Helmut Kohl visited the place in 1991 to make clear that this place should not be shut down. And the company survived. Together with the new owner, French company Elf Aquitaine, in total 9.5 billion mark was invested. A refinery was built and nowadays still 9,000 people work at Leuna Works. But there were a lot of dubious activities varying from bribery to money laundering and from destruction of documents to subsidy fraud. But those never have been clarified. The only thing that could be proven is that almost 90 million marks kind of disappeared that was reserved to oil the political machinery. At the end, some of the main suspects are sentenced to several years of imprisonment and fines. In the regional Treuhand office in the city of Halle, a lot of things went wrong. 2 Treuhand managers accepted bribes worth 24 million marks for selling companies far below their value. For the location Halle, an investigation of 320 privatization cases is done and the result is extrapolated on all transactions, showing that for Halle 2/3 of all contracts are declared as invalid. 20% of the contracts have an indication of criminal offenses. This detailed investigation has never been done for the other regional offices and the Berlin headquarters. But there are also many cases where things went well. About 3,000 companies had management buyouts, a lot of them being successful. Multicar, for example, producing small multi-purpose vehicles. 1,200 employees had to be fired, but management strongly believed that there is a market for multicar, and they were proven right. The Treuhand provided 2 investors that enabled the company to continue to exist. And the brand still exists, being the only East German vehicle brand that still exists. Speaking of vehicles, the automotive industry as such in East Germany has survived. In the country that formerly produced Trabant and Wartburg, in the beginning Opel and Volkswagen, but now also Porsche and BMW roll off the production lines in Leipzig, Chemnitz and Zwickau. At the end of 1994, the Treuhandanstalt was dissolved. Well, the truth is, the tasks of the Treuhand were not yet finished by the end of 1994. Okay, most of the work was done, but the German government also wanted to get rid of the name Treuhand, that had a negative association with too many people. In January 1995, successor BVS, Bundesanstalt für Vereinigungsbedingte Sonderaufgaben, and the name was chosen to be difficult on purpose, took over the remaining tasks of the Treuhand. Until the end of 1994, the Treuhand managed to privatize most of the around 12,000 companies. About 30% of the companies had to be liquidated. Trying to find the main reasons why the privatization did not go as planned, you will come to the following factors that played a big role. First of all, the GDR industry was not as modern and well maintained as everyone thought in 1989. The GDR claimed it belonged to the 10 most high-performing industry nations. But that turned out to be a myth, and it was busted very soon after the fall of the Berlin Wall. There is a joke about a Japanese delegation visiting one of the GDR industries. After the introduction, they are shown around in a production hall. When finished, one of the Japanese businessmen says, "Thanks for showing the museum. Can we see the factory now?" Second, the East European market collapsed. Whole of Eastern Europe was in transformation at the beginning of the 90s, so the original sales market had become significantly smaller. Third, lots of products for the export business had always been sold under cost price in order to get hard currency. The state supported for all these losses, but now that companies had to be able to survive on the market, it was not possible to hold it much longer. After the currency union, the GDR suddenly became an expensive country. Also, everything that was produced in the country. Not just a few percent, but hundreds of percent. And 5, the Treuhand had a huge job that was far from easy. A lot of things went wrong, although mistakes are made everywhere, and although the country was dealing with a unique transformation, it is clear that a lack of control has resulted in a high number of cases of fraud. Citing the German Parliament Inquiry Committee in their 1994 report, the federal government and the Treuhand failed in their mandatory supervision obligation and parliamentary control to such an extent as a democratic government never dared since 1945. Sufficient support and guidance from the government was missing. The Treuhand management had to find out themselves how they should make it happen. In addition, the government put a lot of pressure on the Treuhand, who had to sell under far from optimal market conditions. The German government could easily divert the attention and point at the Treuhand and failed to take responsibility. This also has contributed to the fact that the Treuhand has become a scapegoat for all what went wrong in East Germany. The Treuhand produced a total file stock of more than 200 kilometers, more than 125 miles. A short comparison, the East German Ministry of State Security, Stasi, produced 111 kilometers, 69 miles of file stock during its existence. For a big part, the Treuhand files are still not publicly accessible, which is why a lot of people think that their contents contain secrets that should not get in the open. Below the line, the Treuhand ended with a negative result of around 260 billion Deutsche Marks, 133 billion euros. The end result is that the Treuhand managed to turn East Germany into a market economy, and that was a tough and thankless task. Is the glass half full or half empty? The flourishing landscapes that Helmut Kohl promised can be found, but also industrial ruins. The gross domestic product, GDP per capita in East Germany in 2020 was 78% of the GDP in West Germany, but in the year 2000 that was still 60%. The eastern part of Germany is not there yet, but positive changes are absolutely visible. That's it for today. Let me know if you found this video interesting, and if you want to know more about East Germany, then click the subscribe button. Thanks for watching and see you next time.